My lemon tree gave me absolutely zero fruit for 3 long years, and if you've ever stood in your backyard staring at a healthy-looking tree that refuses to flower, you already know how frustrating that feels. Because back in spring 2021, I planted a Maya lemon tree with high hopes, full sun exposure, good soil, and what I thought was proper care, and visually it looked perfect. Lush, dark green leaves, thick branches spreading wider every season, strong growth that made neighbors say, "Wow, that tree looks healthy." Yet year after year, there wasn't a single lemon, and not even one flower. Every spring I waited with optimism, and every spring delivered the same disappointment. So naturally, I did what most home gardeners do, especially here in the US. I added more fertilizer, watered more often, even moved it into a larger pot thinking root spec was the problem. But instead of helping, all of that made things worse. And if this story sounds familiar, tap the like button right now so YouTube knows this video is helping gardeners like you. Because the turning point came when I almost gave up and stopped by a local nursery where I met a commercial citrus grower from Central California who had spent decades growing lemons at scale. And after listening to my story, he smiled and told me something that sounded completely backward. Stop watering your tree. And I remember thinking that made no sense at all, but I trusted his experience and tried the water stress technique, withholding water for about 14 days, and that single decision changed everything. Because by week 4, I saw the first flower buds forming, and by week 6, my lemon tree was covered in blooms. And right there, I realized the real problem wasn't bad luck, it was biology. And if you want your lemon tree to become a fruit factory instead of a leaf factory, subscribe to Senior Garden Hacks right now, because what I'm about to explain can save you years of frustration, starting with the first major reason lemon trees don't flower, which is too much nitrogen. Because nitrogen is the nutrient that drives vegetative growth, leaves, stems, branches, and when it's abundant, it acts like caffeine for plants, pushing nonstop growth. But flowering is a completely different biological priority that only happens when a plant shifts from growth mode to reproduction mode. And excessive nitrogen keeps the tree comfortable and complacent, producing hormones that say, conditions are perfect, keep growing, no need to reproduce. Which is why dark glossy leaves are often a warning sign rather than a success signal, especially when people use high nitrogen fertilizers labeled things like 20-10-10 or 30-15-15 that are fantastic for lettuce but terrible for fruit trees. Because citrus needs balance, not excess, and when the carbon to nitrogen ratio is skewed too far toward nitrogen, the plant prioritizes structure over seed production. But nitrogen isn't the only problem. Constant watering is reason number 2. And this one surprises most gardeners because water isn't just hydration, it's an environmental signal. And when water is always available, the tree interprets that as safety, stability, and no urgency, while flowering is triggered by mild, controlled stress that tells the plant resources might not last forever, so it's time to reproduce. Which is why commercial citrus farms intentionally withhold water for short periods to force this hormonal shift. And if you're finding this useful, comment your growing zone below, because climate timing matters, and I'll tell you exactly how long to apply water stress where you live. But there's also a third hidden cause that many people overlook, and that's light. Because lemon trees need strong, direct sunlight, at least 6 hours per day. And when a tree grows unchecked, it creates a dense canopy where outer branches hog all the light and inner branches live in permanent shade. And shaded branches simply don't have the energy or hormonal signal required to form flower buds. So the tree keeps feeding the outer growth, creating a feedback loop that turns the whole plant into a ball of leaves with no fruit. And once you understand these 3 causes, too much nitrogen, constant watering, and dense shade, the solutions become clear because there are 5 remedies ranked from easiest to most hands-on, starting with reducing nitrogen and switching to a low nitrogen, higher potassium fertilizer like 5-10-10 to signal reproduction, followed by the most powerful method of all, controlled water stress, where you stop watering until you see slight leaf droop and then deep water thoroughly to trigger uniform flowering. Then shoot bending by gently angling fast-growing vertical branches to 45 to 60 degrees to disrupt growth hormone dominance. Then light pruning every few months to remove vertical water shoots and open the canopy for sunlight and airflow. And finally, a foliar spray with phosphorus and boron after water stress to reinforce flowering signals. And when you apply these remedies correctly, something amazing happens. Your lemon tree stops wasting energy on endless leaves and starts focusing on flowers and fruit. And next spring, when your neighbors ask what fertilizer you're using, you'll smile knowing the real secret wasn't adding more, but doing less. And if you want the next video where I show how to triple lemon yield using a simple finning technique, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. Because once you truly understand how citrus trees think and respond to their environment, gardening stops feeling like guesswork and starts feeling like quiet control. And that's something every home gardener, especially seniors who want results without back-breaking work, can appreciate. So let me take you deeper into what actually happens inside your lemon tree during these changes. Because when you reduce nitrogen and stop constant watering, you're not starving the plant, you're communicating with it in a language plants evolved to understand over thousands of years. A language of signals rather than schedules, abundance rather than excess, urgency rather than comfort. And this is where many gardeners go wrong by treating plants like machines instead of living systems. Because in nature, citrus trees don't receive weekly fertilizer and daily irrigation. They experience cycles of rain and drought, growth and pause, stress and recovery. And flowering is not a random event, but a calculated biological response to those cycles. So when you apply controlled water stress, you're essentially recreating a dry season signal that tells the tree conditions may worsen soon. Now is the time to reproduce. And this is why even trees that have refused to flower for years can suddenly explode with buds within weeks. And if you're still watching this and haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because the kind of practical, low-effort gardening knowledge we share here at Senior Garden Hacks is exactly what helps you work smarter instead of harder, especially as we get older and want gardens that give back instead of draining our energy. And as the water stress period ends and you deep water the soil, something fascinating happens physiologically. The roots, which had slowed growth during dryness, suddenly activate nutrient uptake. Sugars stored in the leaves rush toward developing buds, and flowering hormones dominate the internal chemical conversation, creating a synchronized bloom rather than scattered flowers, which is why commercial citrus farms rely on this technique year after year, not because it's trendy, but because it's reliable, predictable, and free. And yet most backyard gardeners never hear about it because it sounds counterintuitive in a world that constantly tells us to water more, feed more, and intervene more. But more isn't better when it comes to fruiting trees. Balance is. And this same principle applies when we talk about shoot bending, because vertical growth is hormonally dominant, meaning the highest points of the tree receive the strongest growth signals, suppressing everything below them. And by bending those shoots, you're not harming the tree, you're redistributing authority within it, weakening the dominance of growth hormones and allowing dormant flower buds to awaken along the branch, which is why even bending 3 or 4 shoots can trigger a visible response. And if you're still watching this and haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because the kind of practical, low-effort gardening knowledge we share here at Senior Garden Hacks is exactly what helps you work smarter instead of harder, especially as we get older and want gardens that give back instead of draining our energy. Meaning a change in one area influences the whole tree. And while we're on the topic of safety and simplicity, light pruning is another overlooked tool that works not by force, but by refinement. Because heavy pruning shocks a tree into panic growth, while light pruning whispers, make better use of what you have, allowing sunlight to penetrate the canopy, airflow to improve, and fungal pressure to decrease, all of which indirectly support flowering. And if you're thinking this sounds like a lot, remember that remedy number 4 takes about 15 minutes every 3 months, less time than most people spend wondering why their tree won't fruit. And if this explanation is helping you finally understand what's been happening in your own yard, leave a comment with your growing zone and the word lemon so I know which climates to cover more deeply in future videos. Because zone matters not just for timing, but for intensity. And speaking of reinforcement, foliar sprays are not magic bullets, but they can amplify success when used correctly. Because phosphorus plays a key role in energy transfer inside the plant, while boron helps move sugars to developing flowers and strengthens pollen formation, which is why a light foliar application after water stress can act like a green light that tells the tree, yes, this is the right moment to bloom. But sprays should always be supplemental, never a replacement for the foundational signals of nitrogen balance, water cycles, and light exposure. And once you align all 5 remedies, the transformation is often dramatic, not just in the number of flowers, but in the confidence you feel as a gardener. Because instead of reacting to problems, you're anticipating them, guiding the tree instead of chasing it. And this shift is especially empowering for senior gardeners who want predictable success without constant physical effort. And that's exactly why this channel exists. So if you know someone, a neighbor, a friend, a family member, who complains every year about their lemon tree looking great but producing nothing, share this video with them, because you might save them years of frustration. And here's what typically happens next season when these principles are applied correctly. Early spring arrives, and instead of pushing endless leaves, your tree pauses, then quietly forms tight clusters of buds along branches that never flowered before. The air fills with citrus blossom fragrance, pollinators suddenly appear, and what was once a decorative plant becomes productive. And weeks later, tiny green lemons form, then swell, then ripen. And the irony is that the secret wasn't adding more products or spending more money, it was understanding when to step back. And when neighbors ask what special fertilizer you're using, you can honestly say you're using less than ever, because the real fertilizer was knowledge, timing, and restraint. And if you want to go even further, in the next video, I'll show you how selective fruit thinning can actually triple final harvest size and quality by preventing energy overload. So make sure notifications are turned on, because once your tree starts flowering properly, the next skill is learning how to manage abundance. And that's a good problem to have, especially when it ends with baskets of lemons, homemade lemonade, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing you finally cracked the code your tree was trying to teach you all along. Because gardening at this level stops being about luck and starts being about literacy, learning how to read what your tree is telling you through its leaves, posture, color, and timing. And once you develop that skill, you'll notice patterns not just in lemons, but in oranges, limes, grapefruits, and even non-citrus fruit trees, because the same biological rules apply across species. And that's why gardeners who succeed consistently aren't doing anything mystical. They're simply responding correctly to signals, which is exactly why I want you to pause for 1 second right now and hit the like button if you've ever felt confused or misled by generic gardening advice, because this channel exists to cut through that noise and give you what actually works, especially for home gardeners who want real harvests, not just pretty plants. And as your lemon tree moves from flowering into fruit set, another important shift happens that many people misunderstand, which is that the tree will naturally drop some flowers and tiny fruits. And this is normal, not failure, because the tree self-regulates based on available energy, root capacity, and leaf surface area. And panic watering or panic feeding at this stage often reverses all the progress you've made. So restraint remains your greatest tool, letting the tree decide what it can support rather than forcing it to carry more than it can handle. And this is where patience pays off, because as fruits that remain begin to size up, they benefit from the same balanced care: deep but infrequent watering, moderate nutrition, open light exposure. And over time, the lemons become heavier, juicier, and more flavorful than anything you'll find at the store, which is something many senior gardeners appreciate because quality matters more than quantity. And when harvest season finally arrives and you twist that first fully ripe lemon off the branch, you'll realize the journey was never really about the fruit alone. It was about understanding cause and effect, effort and restraint, and learning when to act and when to step back. And if you've stayed with me to this point, comment Fruit Factory below so I know you're serious about transforming your garden, because in upcoming videos, we'll go deeper into advanced but simple techniques like strategic thinning, seasonal nutrient timing, and how to tell just by looking whether your tree is preparing for flowers or stuck in growth mode again. And I'll also show you how these same principles apply to container-grown citrus for patios and small yards, which is especially useful if you're gardening later in life
life and want maximum results from minimal space. So make sure you're subscribed to Senior Garden Hacks and turn on notifications, because this isn't about chasing trends or quick fixes. It's about building a calm, productive garden that works with you year after year. And as you look at your lemon tree now or imagine it blooming next spring, remember this: the tree was never broken. It was only responding to the signals it was given. And once you learned how to send the right ones, everything changed. And that's the real hack.